The centerpiece of the Nintendo Switch's launch is undoubtedly The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The latest installment in the Zelda franchise is the first mainline console release since Skyward Sword for the Wii in 2011, and it is a true reinvention in every sense of the word of the franchise from the ground up. It still feels familiar for longtime fans, but some key changes have truly made this into an experience like none you've ever seen from a Zelda game before. Hi, this is Dash for Curse, and if you're on the fence at all, here's why you should buy The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Or at least consider it heavily. Come on now. Freedom and the open world. The first thing you'll notice about Breath of the Wild is the huge open world. Only a few minutes into the game, the camera pulls back to give you the title drop over a massive landscape. And like any good open world game, everything you see from that vantage point is a place you can go and explore later. The map is vast and varied, and it feels alive and natural. There is wildlife just about everywhere you look, villagers walking around, and even enemies seem to have their own routines. Comparisons to Skyrim are inevitable when you're talking about a world that feels alive, even independent of you as a player, and in this case, they seem appropriate. This truly feels like an Elder Scrolls type world set in the Zelda universe. Recent games in the Zelda series have drawn criticism for companions that are incessant in telling you what to do and where to go, how to feel. Breath of the Wild gives you just enough direction to get started and then turns you loose to explore. And it feels new, but in many ways it's a return to form. The backbone of the original Zelda and the franchise has always been about exploration and discovery. The original Legend of Zelda for the NES gives you a sword and sends you out to explore your surroundings. Breath of the Wild does even less than that. Breath of the Wild turns you loose with little more than the shirt on your back, but no worries, because you're not going to stay like that for long. Items will start dropping for you pretty quickly. And this brings us to another massive change in the Zelda formula, and this is perhaps the most striking of them all, the revamped inventory system. Generally in a Zelda game, you start in a safe starting area where you talk to some people, learn some basic movement mechanics in a low-risk environment. Eventually, you find your starting sword and shield, and you lean on those for about the first third of the game. In Breath of the Wild, it turns the convention completely on its head. A sense of mystery and urgency is instilled immediately, and the first thing you'll find to defend yourself is an ordinary tree branch sitting on the ground. And that tree branch won't take you far either. You use it a few times and it's going to be ready to snap. This is your introduction to an inventory system that completely turns Zelda convention on its ear. You'll find countless usable bows, melee weapons, and shields in the first hour of the game just by picking up enemy drops. And unfortunately, they break pretty easy, so you've got to maintain and be ready to switch out at any time. Now, the typical Zelda game will drip feed new mechanics throughout the game, giving you new items on a need-as basis, usually by completing a dungeon themed around the use of said item. Those items then supplement your bread and butter sword and shield combo. When you play Breath of the Wild, all of that is gone. None of your equipment is permanent. Even your clothing is interchangeable, and you'll get a massive collection of abilities in the prologue of the game. Weapons and equipment will break regularly, often after only a few uses, and you'll need to replace it with whatever you've got lying around, which means your loadout is constantly changing and cycling. Weapons aren't limited to just usual one-handed broadsword either. Link can use one-handed swords, two-handed swords, spears, wooden clubs, axes, boomerangs, and more, and that's just melee weapons. Most of these weapons are just found in the environment or dropped from random enemies who use them against you, and this is another important change. Any weapon or equipment used by an enemy can be picked up and be put to your own use, and these pieces of equipment have different movesets, speeds, durabilities, and damage outputs, and they're all breakable. This creates a fluid situation where your inventory management and optimization and your weapon selection on the fly becomes a major element of the game. There is a real feeling that Link is simply surviving and improvising as he goes, because you run out of weapons, you're in a lot of Barney, so you've always got to be on your toes and look out, but there is this steady influx. It doesn't ever seem like you're just running around for 3 days with your hands empty. There's always something around. Weapon durability is far from the only element that makes Breath of the Wild feel like a survival game. Gone are the days where Link finds hearts hidden in a patch of grass. Instead, you'll find wild fruits, vegetables, nuts, and even bugs that he can use to recover health and boost base stats. Link can also hunt the local fauna for meat and another healing item. Most of these ingredients can be cooked on an open fire to get a minor boost to their effectiveness. But if you find a cooking pot, you can actually combine up to 5 ingredients together to create a unique dish or elixir. These dishes will usually recover lost health, but can also have effects like increasing movement speed, boosting stamina, or even giving a temporary boost to maximum health. Cooking is a fun mechanic to experiment with, and the description of the items gives you a clue as to what their effects will be when cooked, but adding more compatible ingredients to a dish will amplify its effects, more health recovery, longer status boosts, and so on. Of course, adding your own ingredients together that aren't compatible will create a monstrosity that you eat at your own risk. The benefits of cooking really start to shine when Link starts dealing with harsh environmental elements. You'll discover very quickly that the cold is going to kill you in a matter of seconds, and the game's HUD includes a temperature gauge, and Link will rapidly take damage if it gets too hot or too cold. Different clothing will eventually help with this, but if you don't always have that luxury, there are 2 good ways to handle the early frigid weather you'll contend with. The first is fire. Staying close to a campfire keeps you warm and can bring you warmth with you by lighting a torch or even a wood-based weapon on fire. However, you'll lose that warmth once the torch burns out or put it away to climb or switch weapons. So the other method is to cook food that raises your cold resistance. Using spicy peppers with your meals tends to give them a cold resistant effect. Now overall, these are just a couple of brand new mechanics in Breath of the Wild to make it feel like a brand new franchise while still keeping the familiar Zelda charm. It's a reinvention that many fans have been seeking for years. Going out, exploring, most of the combat is happening in the overworld versus the stagnant dungeons. Instead, there's about 100 shrines which you go into to solve puzzles with varying difficulty or sometimes combat, but they can be very quick and you're not just doing a dungeon crawler, it is more about exploration. And the end result is a Zelda game that feels fresh, new, and exciting for the first time in generations. The merits of the Nintendo Switch are, well, they're still up for debate, but Breath of the Wild is a great first step for longtime series fans and newcomers alike. It's an absolute must-have if you have a Switch or Wii U. And so, signing off from a brand new land of Hyrule, this is Tash from Chaos reminding you, thanks for watching and enjoy the game.